time to fuel your business success. Welcome to Harmonious at Lunch. We're bringing you bite-sized advice and expert conversations to drive clarity and growth 5 days a week. Make sure you join our Facebook group at humanopt.com/lunch, where listeners like you and our guests hang out so we can find harmony in business together. If you're building a business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Is culture a squishy word that you can't really quantify and you don't know what to do with in your business? Or is it something we can actually build by design, optimize, and then leverage for scale and growth of our companies? That's the question we're going to try to answer today. And I think you're going to really like this conversation. I have a very special guest with me, Matthew Pearson. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat today.
So, fun fact, in over 450-ish episodes, I have never used the word squishy to start an episode out. I don't know where that came from, but it's here, and now we got to live with it. So sorry, your name's attached to it, Matthew, but this is a fun conversation.
Proud to be a first timer.
Yeah, right. Maybe not. We'll see how this goes. But anyway, this is a fun conversation. You have a topic here, the 4 I's that every organization needs to align for scale. I love alliteration. I love acronyms on this show. I'm excited to dive in here, but why don't we set the stage with this culture topic, because some people think it's a soft skill or a squishy, let's use that word again, topic. You would argue otherwise. So tell me where you stand on culture.
Yeah, it's one that I think a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions around, that over my almost 25-year career now have really developed some strong thinking around, because as someone who's been a founder, an operator, a sell-side banker, a buy-side M&A guy, I've seen businesses run from almost every single angle. And culture has a strong impact on how all of those transactions or growth cycles occur. What's happened though over time, and what I've seen, is that we've common-sized culture. We've made it a one-way discussion. We've done a lot of work around best places to work. And as a result, business books kind of go, okay, let's go look at all the aggregated attributes of those best places to work, and we'll summarize them in a couple bullets and say, hey, these are the 7 things you need to do here, or the 8 things that these companies did here. We talked to 500 companies. And that's made it common size. So everyone started to copy it, said, well, I want to be just like them. I'll do what they did. And that doesn't work for every other company, because culture isn't about everyone else's company. It's about your company and intentionally designing the culture that you want. And so as a result, what's happened, statistics will show almost 50% of new hires actually quit in their first 18 months. So obviously that common-sized approach, it's not working. How can we do better? It's not this amorphous way of doing. I actually argue culture's intentional output of systems and processes. We can get that right.
I agree with you. And I've said it on this show before. I know guests have come on and said similar things, but culture happens whether you plan for it or not. It's right. Just that the better cultures are planned for, and they're designed. There's intention behind them. So you have a culture in your business. If you've never thought about it, it's there, and it might take a whole lot to undo. It may not be a culture that you really like, and it may not be a culture that's attracting top talent to your organization. So I'm very excited to dive in and hear how we can actually change that, so we could change the direction of our companies. Right. So the 4 I's, where do we start with this? Is there an I that's your favorite, or how do you usually approach this topic?
Favorite I. There's actually a 5th I, and it's the output of the 4 I's. So the 5th I is called constrained independence. And that's actually what culture is. If you actually step back and think about a culture as a box, or what constrained independence is, if you, Brandon, as an employee, went to a new job, technically speaking, you have unlimited independence to action and ideate to do what you need to do to complete your job. But if every single person actually did that, there'd be chaos. So in order to meet product quality standards or service delivery standards, companies put in what I call constrained independence. They constrain the ability for an employee to have freedom of action. They give them clarity, boundaries. But what's happening is we've actually messed up those boundaries of what those things are. It actually can be known. And so the degree of constraint can be very tight, can be very heavy. And some companies that are heavily regulated or have compliance might need that. And some individuals actually prefer that because they don't want to ideate, they just want to execute. Other people need very light constraint because they want the freedom to ideate, to innovate, to think, to do, to make the decision on their own. Somewhere in that volume is the preferred constraint for you and for me. Now, you might say, well, geez, there's 500 employees, 5,000 employees, 500,000 employees. How do you take all those unique partialities and give them a box they all fit in? Because if they're all in the box, then your way of doing and the company's way of doing match, and you have great culture. If you're outside the box, then you as an individual, your way of doing, your beliefs about how things should get done doesn't match a company's, then you probably don't like the culture. And to me, it's that simple. It's a symbiotic relation between the employee and the company in terms of matching their philosophical beliefs and their ways of doing. The 4 I's, which are identity, instruction, intercommunication, and information feedback, can be used to create that box, that square. That's why what I've developed is called the square management system. And it helps you knowingly and intentionally create a square that creates the preferred degree of constrained independence. Correspondingly, as an individual, you should probably then go on townsquare-advisors.com and take the quiz. It's free, or actually do the full survey and learn about this, because you have your own degrees of independence that help you as an employee work well. When those 4 things come together, those 4 walls come together in a complete square, and all the employees fit inside that box, and hiring and managing does a great job of putting the people in that box, then you've got great culture.
I love this. So I want to pick apart the 4 aspects, of course, and the 4 I's. But
Sure.
Before we do that, the constrained independence, it's fair to say then, let's just put numbers to this. If someone's square or the company's square is 10 by 10, let's say, and an individual employee's square is 1 by 1, that's okay because they're within the overall 10 by 10 square. But the minute you have an employee whose square is maybe 11 by 11, that will not work. Am I hearing your example correctly?
That's correct. And there's also a degree to which you might be so tight. So if you're 1 by 1 and that company's 10 by 10, that you as an individual that might be too loose. The company might actually be too loose for you. So there's a degree to which you might be a preference of a heavy level of constraint and the company's too broad. And if you get too far away from where you want to be, then there's trouble the other way, because some people don't like that freedom. They don't want to have to ideate on their own. They just want to execute, and that's okay too.
Gotcha. But theoretically, in that situation, you could always manage down to that person within the organization, but you can never expand the overall box.
No, I think that's very hard. If you have someone who really does not, and I felt that I'm more of a wide box guy, and I've been in heavy constrained environments, and it's tough. It's a tough place to be.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That makes sense. I've definitely been there as well. I don't know your system, but I can picture it, and I've for sure been there. I'm sure a lot of our listeners too have been as well. So let's pick apart the 4 I's here. How do we understand these? I know you have an assessment. I put the link on the screen here. It's also in the show notes down below, wherever you're watching or listening, townsquare-advisors.com. So go check that out. But Matthew, let's get back to the 4 I's. How do we be intentional about them and foster and create them within our organization?
Sure. So the first I is identity, and that's where the square starts. And that's key, because this is how your organization defines itself. It's your mission, your values, your brand personality, your core beliefs. The key question for executives there: do our people know, our staff know what we stand for and why, and our customers? The biggest problem with identity that occurs is you get what I call product to mission drift, where all of a sudden the company has advertised, promoted itself for years on one principle or several principles, and then all of a sudden they made an acquisition or they launched a product that's way outside that, and they haven't properly communicated or structured their business for that ability to scale or to augment or change. They've been very narrow and they went broad, and that throws off customers, that throws off employees. All of a sudden people say, wait a second, we're really good at X, you did Y. Are we even going to be able to deliver this? And so things go sideways there. So there's 10 elements in each of these I's, and there's 10 in identity, the big one there being product to mission fit. You have to get that in the right level for your business. Some people really want to stay tight. This is who we are. We're never going to change. That's okay too. The second I is instruction. That's how the company operates. That's clarity and consistency of expectations, onboarding protocols, service level standards, knowledge transfer. The key question here are roles, expectations, processes. Are they clear and scalable? Really important, because as you said, culture exists either intentionally or unintentionally. If you don't define those things, your employees are going to then set the standard for you. And sometimes that may not be good enough. So that's what actually happens most often here. The failure is that employees don't know what to do, and they set their own service level, and you get varying degrees of performance across the organization. The third I is intercommunication. That's how we interact. This is what most people think culture is. It's your ping pong table, the happy hours on Thursdays. It's how people interact. hierarchy structures, meeting cadences, where how often you have to go to the office versus not, how often do you meet? Is it a formal office? Is it informal? The key question, though, is really around information flow. Is information flowing in a way that drives clarity and trust? And the key thing, that the problem here is you'll often get the frontline workers who are not seeing or hearing the same messaging as maybe the executive staff, because they haven't set up the communication structures very well. Or, and this is where a lot of people feel culture drift, is you hear one thing in the HR manager and the hiring people and the onboarding process, and then you get into the office and it's completely different. You're like, well, wait a second, I thought we had X, Y, and Z. No one ever says, by the way, that and when they get hired, that they have a bad culture. It's never happened. And so there's a reason for that. It's because everyone thinks their ways of doing are great, and that's where you have to get alignment. So this is a very important one to get correct from a external view perspective, because if you get the bait and switch, that's where you get problems. And the last one,
fair to say, but before you move on to the last one, real quick, is it fair to say that that's where that 50% stat comes from?
Most likely,
the misperception between external and internal culture.
Yes, 100%. Because you only need to know so much at an arm's length. And a lot of what culture stems from is actually the HR department, because or the hiring manager, because they're the first person you talk to. And no one is going to sit there and say, well, we have a tough culture. This is a bad, tough place to work, man. Like, no one's ever said that, right? And new hires, one of my favorite phrases, new hires don't start their first day disgruntled. They get that way. How does that happen? It's because of the bait and switch that usually happens. And it's a result of hearing one thing and seeing another when they come in.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I interrupted you. I apologize. But the fourth eye, hit it.
Fourth eye, last one, the complete one, the one that a lot of people miss. Information feedback. This is how we improve. How is performance measured? Not just for the employee, but for the company too. And that's where we get a little bit of a miss. But this is where, how do you evolve? Feedback loops, performance reviews, recognition programs. Are we learning and adapting fast enough to stay competitive? That's the key question there. The big miss at times here on this eye is the company doesn't review itself well enough. They think they're perfect. They review the employees, but they're not actually reviewing the company. They're not taking that feedback seriously. And then they're not actioning against that. And customers will then churn off, or, they'll have problems in market perception. So that's the key one. Each one has 10 elements, and each element can be a high, medium, or low level of constraint. The whole point here is that this is actionable, and it's also about your company. It's not meant to be an aggregation. You're not supposed to copy anyone else. Now, I did actually have AI take this test, all 40 elements, and produce what they considered the optimal eye, just out of curiosity. And they said, hey, let's have what I call a moderate degree of constraint on identity to allow us to flex with the market. You don't get that product to mission fit problem. Let's do heavy level of instruction so everyone really knows what they're doing and they're on point with what decisions they can and can't make. Let's keep intercommunication really light so that the information flows really freely through the business. And let's make information feedback moderate so that we're not analysis paralysis, but we're also not missing key information. That was AI's response. At the same time, there is no correct culture, right? The correct culture is the one that works for you and the employee. But I thought it was interesting to see how AI responded to the box.
Yeah, I bet if you really think about that too, that's probably how the AI was programmed.
Could be
very, very similarly to that. So that's a nice little thought exercise you can go through. I'm curious though, on the information feedback, is there an order of operations here? Because I would think, like, okay, if you've never put thought into your culture, you've never really, you've never designed it, you just kind of hire people and they exist, and some people leave and some people stay. If you immediately prioritize information feedback and feedback about the company, you may be taking into account people who you don't really want there as part of your culture. Like, do you have to do other phases first before you get to that? Or do you have to weigh certain people's feedback more than others? Like, how do you approach that if you haven't gone through the work of designing a culture yet?
So that's a really, really good question. This is meant to be a diagnostic as much as it is educational. And I think the book is applicable on various stages of company growth. If you're a mature company and you as an executive know you've got a little bit of a culture problem and you haven't intentionally designed an organization that's just kind of grown up, this is a great diagnostic. The way you'd use this is you would have the executive team, senior, middle, and frontline employees all take the exam. It's not an exam, it's a survey. And aggregate those questions and answers so that you get a score by level for each side of the square. And you can immediately see where the differences are. And then what you would do is you would start to action against that delta so that you can understand where you're getting disconnect. What's going to happen is as you make organizational changes in systems and processes, There are some people who are going to self-select out because they're going to say, well, wait a second, my world has changed. I was content with this square and you've changed the square. And that's okay because you're intentionally changing it to affect the culture that you want. The hardest part of culture is actually having the constitution to both, one, adhere to what you said you were going to do, and B, realize that that isn't for everybody. And this is the hardest part about it. Remember, I said culture is two-way street. It's on the employee, but it's on the company. And you have to be able to let some people go. You have to know and be okay with that some people won't fit. And that's that change management process. So in order to go through the customer feedback cycle, which should go last, you got to get the organization first, then you have to get the employees second, and then lastly would be the customer side of things. And so that's how I would probably structure it. It'd be different if I was a startup. There'd be a different approach there.
Yeah, if you're a startup, you just need ping pong tables and free lunch. I think that's what they all do. So.
Exactly. And yeah, for startup founders, I mean, what's been coming across is they usually have great IP and they have this great product, but they're really technical and they haven't thought about, well, how do we then put this into scale? One of the things I say all the time is a product vision will never grow and scale if the business decisions behind it aren't there. And that's what I see a lot in products. We're going to have product-led growth. Okay. But you have to be able to facilitate that product-led growth with the components behind it. And if you don't, you're going to make a bad financial decision, bad operating decision, bad HR decision. So you have to have the constructs behind it. This will actually help you if you're a tech guy, you've never built a company before, you can take the survey and go, this is, instead of it being a diagnostic, it's actually going to help you understand what elements you'd want to put in place. In the book, The Culture of Alignment, that is pending publication, it actually details for you based on each element what it looks like to implement each element from a heavy, moderate, or light constraint perspective. So you as a reader can go, okay, those are the characteristics that I want for this element. And again, you don't need to be uniform. It's not like each side of the square has to be a 10 by 10 by 10. It could be 8, 10, 2, 5, so that because you have differing levels, just like AI produce different levels. And that's okay. It needs to be intentionally designed for the characteristics that you want. As long as you can understand the why, then you can do the how, which is putting together the elements. So read the book, or you go online and look at the survey, take each question and answer it, and you will start to understand how then you organize this entire business around all these operating procedures and elements. And there you go. You've got a complete operating system. Again, simple in construct, to be honest with you. There's some of these elements that sound kind of like, yeah, that sounds obvious. The difference is that companies don't intentionally do this, and they don't adhere to it, and they don't keep on repeating that same cycle to ensure that they're actually aligned throughout time, and that's when things go sideways.
I love it. It's a real-time snapshot of your organization, the diagnostic, and then it can become the blueprint and baseline for where you are and where you need to be. Matthew, I love it. Thank you so much for being here. We put your website on the screen. It's in the show notes down below. You already talked about where to find the diagnostic. Real quick, though, I want to know, do you have a date yet for the book, an anticipated date?
Sometime in 2026. Publishing takes a little bit longer than you anticipate. The book's written. It's good. It's going through conversations with different publishers. So excited about that. Trying to raise awareness, trying to raise thought leadership around the concept. Go to townsquare-advisors.com. Free quiz for anyone to take it and just learn a little bit more about themselves. Or you can deep dive into the full 40-element methodology. I think when everyone takes it, they say one thing. I always kind of thought around this, but it's really highlighted a few things that I didn't know about myself, which is great to see.
That's awesome. So again, that's in the show notes, but go connect with Matthew on social media too, so you're aware of when the book's coming out. We're rooting for you, Matthew. I appreciate this. This was a fantastic episode. So thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For those of you watching and listening, think about it and think about the question that I asked you in the beginning of the episode about squishy cultures. This might be the missing piece. If you think cultures are squishy, well, go check out the diagnostic and see if you still feel the same way, and then go do something about it. If your culture's not where you want it to be, it can be. It's not accidental. It is absolutely on purpose. Listen to this episode again, and we'll see you back tomorrow on some more Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for being here.
Another episode of Harmonious at Lunch in the books. I hope this episode made you think and you grabbed some actionable ideas to propel your business. Don't forget to like, comment your takeaways, and subscribe wherever you're listening so we can help more entrepreneurs just like you achieve harmony in their life and business.